Everyday Use by Alice Walker, Part 2. I never had an education myself. After second grade, the school was closed down. Don't ask me why. In 1927, colored asked fewer questions than they do now. Sometimes Maggie reads to me. She stumbles along good-naturedly, but can't see well. She knows she's not bright. Like good looks and money, quickness passed her by. She will marry John Thomas, who has mossy teeth and an earnest face. And then I'll be free to sit here and, I guess, just sing church songs to myself. Although I never was a good singer, never could carry a tune. I was always better at a man's job. I used to love to milk till I was hooked in the sight in 49. Cows are soothing and slow and don't bother you unless you try to milk them the wrong way. I have deliberately turned my back on the house. It is 3 rooms, just like the one that burned, except the roof is tin. They don't make shingle roofs anymore. There are no real windows, just some holes cut in the sides, like the portholes in a ship, but not round and not square, with rawhide holding the shutters up on the outside. This house is in a pasture too, like the other one. No doubt when Dee sees it, she will want to tear it down. She wrote me once that no matter where we choose to live, she will manage to come see us, but she will never bring her friends. Maggie and I thought about this, and Maggie asked me, "Mama, when did Dee ever have any friends?" She had a few, furtive boys in pink shirts hanging about on wash day after school, nervous girls who never laughed. Impressed with her, they worshipped the well-turned phrase, the cut shape, the scalding humor that erupted like bubbles in lye. She read to them. When she was courting Jimmy T, she didn't have much time to pay to us, but turned all her fault-finding power over him. He flew to marry a cheap city girl from a family of ignorant, flashy people. She hardly had time to recompose herself. When she comes, I will meet... But there they are. Maggie attempts to make a dash for the house in her shuffling way, but I stay her with my hand. "Come back here," I say. And she stops and tries to dig a well in the sand with her toe. It is hard to see them clearly through the strong sun, but even the first glimpse of a leg out of the car tells me it is Dee. Her feet were always neat-looking, as if God himself had shaped them with a certain style. From the other side of the car comes a short, stocky man. Hairs all over his head, a foot long, and hanging from his chin like a kinky mule tail. I hear Maggie suck in her breath. Ugh, is what it sounds like. Like when you see the wriggling end of a snake just in front of your foot on the road. Ugh. D next. A dress down to the ground in this hot weather. A dress so loud it hurts my eyes. There are yellows and oranges enough to throw back the light of the sun. I feel my whole face warming from the heat waves that it throws out. Earrings go too, and hanging down to her shoulders. Bracelets dangling and making noises when she moves her arm up to shake the folds of the dress out of her armpits. The dress is loose and flows, and as she walks closer, I like it. I hear Maggie go, ugh, again. It is her sister's hair. It stands straight up like the wool on a sheep. It is black as night, and around the edges are 2 long pigtails that rope about like small lizards, disappearing behind her ears. "Wasuzotino," she says, coming on in that gliding way the dress makes her move. The short, stocky fellow with the hair to his navel is all grinning, and he follows up with, "Assalamualaikum, my mother and sister." He moves to hug Maggie, but she falls back, right up against the back of my chair. I feel her trembling there, and when I look up, I see the perspiration falling off her chin. "Don't get up," says Dee. "Since I am stout, it makes something of a push. You can see me trying to move a second or two before I make it." She turns, showing white heels through her sandals, and goes back to the car. Out she peeks next with a Polaroid. She stoops down quickly and lines up picture after picture of me sitting there in front of the house with Maggie cowering behind me. She never takes a shot without making sure the house is included. When a cow comes nimbling around the edge of the yard, she snaps it at me and Maggie and the house. Then she puts the Polaroid in the back seat of the car and comes up and kisses me on the forehead. Meanwhile, Assalamualaikum is going through motions with Maggie's hand. Maggie's hand is as limp as a fish and probably as cold, despite the sweat, and she keeps trying to pull it back. It looks like Assalamualaikum wants to shake hands but wants to do it fancy. Or maybe he don't know how people shake hands. Anyhow, he soon gives up on Maggie. Well, I say, D. No, Mama, she says. Not D. Wangero li wanika ke manjo. What happened to D? I wanted to know. She's dead, Wangero said. I couldn't bear it any longer, being named after the people who oppress me. You know as well as me, you was named after your aunt Decidi, I said. Decidi is my sister. She named D. We called her Big D after D was born. But who was she named after? Asked Wangero. I guess after Grandma D, I said. And who was she named after? Asked Wangero. Her mother, I said, and saw Wangero was getting tired. That's about as far back as I can trace it, I said. Though in fact, I probably could have carried it back beyond the Civil War through the branches. Well, said Assalamualaikum, there you are. I heard Maggie say. There I was not, I said. Before DC cropped up in our family, so why should I try to trace it that far back? He just stood there grinning, looking down on me like somebody inspecting a Model A car. Every once in a while, he and Wangero sent eye signals over my head. How do you pronounce this name? I asked. You don't have to call me by it if you don't want to, said Wangero. Why shouldn't I asked. If that's what you want us to call you, we'll call you. I know it might sound awkward at first, said Wangero. I'll get used to it, I said. Ream it out again. Well, soon we got the name out of the way. Assalamualaikum had a name twice as long and 3 times as hard. After I tripped over it 2 or 3 times, he told me to just call him Hakim a barber. I wanted to ask him, was he a barber? But I didn't really think he was, so I didn't ask. You must belong to those beef cattle peoples down the road, I said. They said Assalamualaikum when they met you, too, but they didn't shake hands. Always too busy, feeding the cattle, fixing the fences, putting up salt lick shelters, throwing down hay. When the white folks poisoned some of the herd, the men stayed up all night with rifles in their hands. I walked 1.5 miles just to see the sight. Hakim Barber said, I accept some of their doctrines, but farming and raising cattle is not my style. They didn't tell me and I didn't ask whether Wangero D had really gone and married him. We sat down to eat and right away he said he didn't eat collards and pork was unclean. Wangero, though, went on through the chitlins and cornbread, the greens and everything else. She talked a blue streak over the sweet potatoes. Everything delighted her. Even the fact that we still used the benches her daddy made for the table when we couldn't afford to buy chairs. Oh, Mama, she cried, then turned to Hakim Barber. I never knew how lovely these benches are. You can feel the rum prints, she said, running her hands underneath her and along the bench. Then she gave a sigh, and her hand closed over Grandma D's butter dish. That's it, she said. I knew there was something I wanted to ask you if I could have. She jumped up from the table and went over in the corner where the churn stood, the milk in it clabber by now. She looked at the churn and looked at it. This churn top is what I need, she said. Didn't Uncle Buddy whittle it out of a tree you all used to have? Yes, I said. Uh-huh, she said happily. And I want the dasher too. Uncle Buddy whittled that too? Asked the barber. Dee Wangero looked up at me. Aunt Dee's first husband whittled the dash, said Maggie, so low you almost couldn't hear her. His name was Henry, but they called him Stash. Maggie's brain is like an elephant's, Wanger said, laughing. I can use the churn top as a centerpiece for the alcove table, she said, sliding a place over the churn. And I'll think of something artistic to do with the dasher. When she finished wrapping the dasher, the handle stuck out. I took it for a moment in my hands. You didn't even have to look close to see where hands pushing the dasher up and down to make butter had left a kind of sink in the wood. In fact, there were a lot of small sinks. You could see where thumbs and fingers had sunk into the wood. It was beautiful light yellow wood, from a tree that grew in the yard where Big D and Stash had lived. End of part 2.